Evan Pritchard, and I'm talking about Food for Change. For a while I was visiting with my family in Greenbelt, Maryland, which is probably the oldest communal co-op village around. It was started by someone named Eleanor Roosevelt in 1943, and it's still there, it's still the same, everything's the same. They have a co-op store, grocery store, they have a co-op theater, both live theater and movie theater, co-op TV stations, co-op everything, and it's a cool place to hang out. And so I was watching the co-op TV station one day on Thanksgiving, and I happened to turn on the TV on this channel just as this film was being shown on the channel called Food for Change. So I just happened to hit it right at the beginning, and immediately I was just captivated by the way the film was made, and then I just kind of stood there like this, watching it, and I said, everybody be quiet, I want to hear this. And so we listened to the whole thing, it was a 90-minute program. And then I went online and I called the director and I said, you know, what the heck, what is this? This is great. How can I get involved, and can I rent one? He says, no, you can't rent them. This is like a first run production, and I'm still getting the, you know, theaters and whatnot and co-ops to show it. And I said, well, you know, I want to be involved in that. So he told me there's a certain amount of money that you know, pay to buy in, and then you get a license to show it to people. And then you can help raise money for the co-op centers as well as get your money back and whatnot, and show the film and get people to talk. And he's a musician. Steve Alvis is the director-producer, and he also performs sometimes. So I said, well, I can do that too. I can go out and sing songs before we start, and then talk about this movement. And the thing about the movie, Food for Change, that I thought is different, it's the first film to show the entire history of the cooperative movement, the co-op movement in America. And it's also very philosophical and very good at describing the relationship between human beings and the planet, and why there are problems in that relationship, and why cooperative approaches seem to be very effective in terms of what is going on today. And one of the things that I've said, quotably, is that I feel that he has captured in his film like one piece of the puzzle of how the human race is going to be able to continue into the future, and then he places that piece right where it will do the most good, right in our hearts, because it's a very heartfelt piece, but it has a lot of information. It's also funny. So my part is that I am Algonquin and Native American, and I'm the director of the Center for Algonquin Culture, and it's kind of up to me to try to keep those teachings coming out, that lifestyle, like as our people lived thousands of years ago. And they were hunter-gatherer people, some agriculture, depending on the latitude, but people had to go out as a group in order to harvest food, in order to gather and collect food. And then they would eat it together, because otherwise there really isn't another sensible possibility. And so even the dogs, if the dogs helped, for example, hunt the geese, then that dog that hunted the geese would share and actually sit at the table or on the blanket and share the food. So that's kind of a cooperative model as well. So what I bring to the table or the blanket is some of the insights from the Algonquin ancestors about food, about gathering it, and sharing the communal experience. So that's part of it. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. But it goes everywhere. It's an amazing film, an amazing opportunity to instigate social change without necessarily changing the government. Because if we can't influence the government because it's logjammed or broken, as many people say, then we need to find a model that's not going to get us all killed. You know, it's just something that we can do without changing necessarily the government, but also, as the case with Hunger Mountain, yes, sometimes the government will be changed as need be, simply by the power and the presence of focused groups of people that are actually improving their own lives. So that's the kind of thing I was looking for. I found it, and I want to share it with the world. I really love the film, and I've just started to show it to groups with good effect, and I enjoy seeing it. And so I'm starting, you know, there's different co-ops and different organizations that are built cooperatively who are planning to have me come and show the film. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is very and that's not why I brought into the film, but the minute I did decide, I was saying, is this the right thing to do? And is co-op really the way of the future? A news report came on PBS and on NPR radio, and it was from BBC, and they're all reporting that there was this tiny little food co-op near Montpelier called Hunger Mountain Co-op. It was taking on the world by storm, and they helped to write the Vermont law, the labeling law, to ensure that GMOs were labeled in food. And it was the first state to actually pass a full law for that, and it's going into effect soon. But then at the same time, Congress came up with a countermeasure, a federal law that would basically erase the Vermont law. The Vermonters, again, these people, a lot of the brain power is coming from this little co-op, is that they call that now the dark law, the directive against the right to know. And their slogan has been, well, if GMOs are so good for us, why don't you want us to know about it? Or wouldn't you be happy that we knew about it? And so this co-op has been really leading the charge. And there was a massive protest there against GMOs, where they, I think, had maybe 10 buses full of protesters from Boston and other protesters from all over the country and the world coming to the Hunger Mountain Co-op to stage this big media event, protesting the dark law, the idea of erasing this Vermont law, which everybody was very happy with. And so it's very dramatic that a co-op has risen to the point where members of Congress are requesting that they fly in delegates from the Hunger Mountain Co-op to meet with them in the Capitol building. I mean, this is, to me, unprecedented. It reminds me of the story of David and Goliath, right? So here's this world's tiniest co-op really scaring the whatever out of these congressional leaders. And there are other reasons for this. It's not totally accidental, but it's these very few people, and several hundred people, but with a strong conviction about something that they know about, that they're taking their stand and really shaking up this issue and other issues globally. So there's a lot of things about GMOs that I think people in this community are aware of, but there's Bt toxins causing problems with people's health. These Bt toxins are in the GMOs, and you wouldn't get them any other way, and they're having studies in Quebec showing that 80-some% of people have it in their blood. How did it get in there? Well, it got in there probably through food. And so this is great concern because these toxins are linked to diseases and leaky gut syndrome and cancer. So they're linked. They're still studying it. But we know GMOs are not completely benign or should not be considered so until all the results are in. So this is like a next, we had fracking and now there's issues with that. Now we're talking about GMOs, and one of the reasons that the co-ops have been successful is because enough people realize the importance of organic foods as a niche market that these co-ops actually address. And so there's been a lot of politics surrounding them. But that's why I want to show this film, because it addresses quite a number of issues. It addresses a model for future organizations of human beings and living. It addresses GMOs, which is going to emerge, I think, as a basic health issue, and it emerges, many ways in our lives, even though it seems very small right now. And one of the things about the film is that it is a cheerleader film. It does make you feel good about co-ops, and I think that's deliberate. And I think, and maybe it's a little slanted, but okay, I think politically it's the time for that we have a little excitement about something so mundane as a co-op. And it also goes into the success of some co-ops, like in Minneapolis right now. It goes into some detail about how big co-ops are in Minneapolis and how it's really almost, that approach is influencing all the other stores, and they're competing with the co-ops, even though the percentages are low. Because anybody who wants the organic, they go to the co-ops that are everywhere in Minneapolis, and they're very successful. And another thing is that they're actually cooperating with each other as well as amongst themselves. So you have a co-op that's succeeding and expanding quickly, and the workers own the store jointly, and they're getting a living wage and even health insurance, and they're eating well, and then they're expanding, and then other co-ops across town want to grow up, and they're actually cooperating with the other co-ops, which is actually quite nice, quite surprising. that they're not afraid of losing their market shares. So that's another phenomenon that's happening. There's studies showing there's a possibility that, the United States dollar may be unplugged from, being pegged to world markets. And if that happens, it's going to affect us drastically, and capital, the exchange of capital may become complicated. And in that case, people will need a cooperative model where food may be exchanged for work or other non-monetary means, and quickly. And we already have this tradition in America of co-ops, which goes back to, England in the 1700s, but then 1800s in America, right through several phases in the 20th century, and he shows what goes wrong with them and how they fail, and that's very valuable. And so what I'm seeing is like the sequel would be, okay, what if the whole, US dollar is unplugged from world markets and it goes down the toilet? What are we going to do to eat? Well, here's the answer. Okay, this could work. And I really think that's worth looking at. And so, yeah, I hope that, that doesn't happen, but the possibility is right there in front of us. I mean, if anybody reads The Death of Money or any of these books, they'll say, whoa, wait a minute, this is like really close, or possible. So what do we do? Well, Steve Alva's film, I think, shows us a way. And it's also a way to build communities where we learn to get along with each other more in a tribal way without pretending to be actual Native Americans, which some people just aren't. But I am, and I like to help with that because I believe in the principle of it. I don't necessarily like people, necessarily like saying, well, I have to be Indian now in order to be communal. That's probably not the best way to go. This movie shows a non-native model of community living, which has succeeded for hundreds of years. And by the way, I also want to add, since we're making this film, that my ancestors were involved in co-ops as far back as I know. On my Mi'kmaq lineage side, going back, my mom always shopped at co-ops, that said co-op with the two pine trees, which is, by the way, a generic symbol. She's Mi'kmaq. My grandfather actually was involved in some co-op. There was a cooperative campground where people who didn't really have any place to go could kind of camp out for very little in exchange for work or whatever. And then there was a cooperative oil company, by the way, and a cooperative stores before that. And, we had that. Our family understood that co-ops were a way that Mi'kmaqs could live in white society and still kind of be themselves and encourage their values without stepping on toes. So it was that, for us, it was this marginal area, this kind of cultural overlap where we could say, oh yeah, we belong to the co-op and still be, Mi'kmaq. And during the Depression, our people shared food with people, white or red, who didn't have any. They would go out and hunt, because the laws were a little looser. They'd go out and hunt lots of deer meat and share it with anybody who was starving. And so it was said that nobody starved as long as my grandfather had a good hunt, because he shared it all and didn't save it or hoard it. And that was part of that cooperative thing that everybody understood. And so I come from that, and I heard these stories growing up. So when I saw this film, it actually, seeing it, and with my family, by the way, but seeing it was a big revelation, because suddenly I had an aha moment. And I thought, this is how our people in our family have transitioned into the Western world, through co-ops, through these co-op stores and movements. And and this has always been a part of my life that I never really understood where it fit in. And now all of a sudden I said, oh yes, it fits in right here. And so I believe in this, This is something I can understand. It's not, burning down, the cities or taking over the government. It's just something you can do by yourself. And that's the way our people have been. Because some of my ancestors got involved in white politics, even though they're native, because they walked away from the reservation system, which was corrupt, and they just kind of became people, which I guess they always were. Then getting into politics in order to change things, and also then getting involved with co-ops in some way. And I'm researching this. Since I saw the film, I started researching this, and people tell different stories now. You know how militants are, but yeah, it's what I remember. And I certainly remember the two pine trees. everywhere my mother shopped, there were these 2 pine trees, and I never thought about it, but it would say co-op, and I just thought most stores were co-ops. And now I know there was probably only 2 co-ops in the entire region, and there's where we shopped. And I remember, we spent a lot of time in there, and we misbehaved, and we ran around in the stores and knocked things over, and there was health food and whatnot. We thought that everybody ate health food, So it was a big revelation. It made sense. I understood now, and my parents lived in a co-op village for the last 30 years, and I never thought anything about it. So when I was looking at the co-op TV station and seeing the show, it's like, oh, aha, now I get it. It all fits together. And this is something that my ancestors would approve of, And so, as a Mi'kmaq, which isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. So that's where I'm at. And I also have been learning about organic food and its importance, about hunting and gathering even today, foraging, and also just health in general. The importance of, health comes down to food, right? I mean, to me, I stopped really taking vitamins and pills a long time ago and just started healing myself with food, and I've had no problem. It's really been very, very successful for me. And so the idea of getting food that hasn't been polluted, irradiated, GMO'd makes even more sense, because then you read about what those things do, and it's quite serious.
When I grew up as a kid and teenager, Whole Foods was 2 stores in Austin, and it was a co-op. And then I sort of watched it.
The Whole Foods.
Yeah. It sort of went from 2 stores that were co-op that all my friends in high school worked at and their families had been a part of, to a corporation, and then it became what we all see it now as like industrial organic something or other. It's interesting to see or at least my experience of our culture, like go through these sort of cycles of, we like co-ops, oh no, we can't handle putting in time or whatever the payoff is to become a member.
Well, the film deals with that. It takes one co-op called the Greenfield Co-op, and it goes through, starting in the early 60s, and going through the whole curve of the history of this one co-op as a kind of a central theme. And it shows you all the mistakes they make and all the little mini revolutions and coups that go on over time and relationships breaking apart. And it's really, I think, very touching. It's very effective to show, like, these are real people. They don't know what they're doing, but they're learning as best they can and spinning off. And so that Greenfield chain is like a trunk through the film, and then branching off into all these other co-ops. They actually open branches of different names for this co-op. At the same time, other co-ops and certain individuals jump off and start their own co-ops around the country, and then farms start growing. And so they show this very gradual evolution process.